Today, Saudi Arabia is under attack from outside. 4 decades back, it suffered an attack from within. And that one attack completely changed the country. It's worth revisiting that story. There was a time when Saudi Arabia was a progressive state, a traditional but tolerant society that promoted modernity and openness. It wasn't really a bastion of liberalism, it never was, but the country was not as extreme either. The rulers did not control what people wore. The clerics did not dictate daily life. Independent thinking was promoted. Extremist doctrines were rejected. Men and women could interact in public in Saudi Arabia. There was such a time. But things changed after 1979, a fateful year that sent Saudi Arabia down the path of conservatism. The Islamic Revolution in Iran played a key role in making this happen. So did an event that unfolded within Saudi Arabia, an event that finds very little mention in history books. But it's of immense significance. We're talking about the siege of the Grand Mosque in Mecca. It's the holiest site in the Islamic world. It came under attack from radical Islamists. It was the deadliest terrorist attack ever in the kingdom. It took Saudi Arabia far from modernity to desert tribalism. And we are going to discuss the motivations behind it in a bit. But first, let's tell you what happened here in 1979. On the 20th of November 1979, about 50,000 Muslims from across the world had gathered at the Grand Mosque for the dawn prayer. Present among them were 200-odd radical Islamists led by their leader, Juhayman al-Otaibi. Al-Otaibi was a 40-year-old preacher. He believed that the Saudi monarchy had lost its legitimacy, that it had become corrupt in its imitation of the West. So he laid siege to the Grand Mosque and he called upon his followers to overthrow the House of Saud, the rulers of Saudi Arabia. It was a well-planned operation, armed with handguns and rifles. The insurgents stayed at the mosque for 2 long weeks. They turned it into a killing zone. Khalid bin Abdulaziz Al Saud was the king of Saudi Arabia at that time, 1979. He declared these insurgents as apostates. He ordered an assault to wipe them out. Saudi forces, with the help of the French military advisors, ended the siege on the 4th of December 1979. It took 2 weeks. 117 of these insurgents were killed in gunfights. 63 others were executed. This included their leader, Juhayman al-Otaibi. He became one of the first Islamists to be beheaded publicly. After the dust settled, Saudi Arabia took a giant leap towards Islamism. The Shia revolution in Iran further amplified its fears. The House of Saud suspected the end was near, so in order to cement its authority in the Islamic world, it decided to portray itself as the protector of the faith. How did it do this? By taking refuge in Wahhabism. The Saudi rulers renewed their ties with Wahhabi clerics, appointed them to important positions in governance, in education, in judiciary, and also religious guidance. Social reforms were rolled back, civil liberties were restricted, strict dress codes were enforced, women were barred from almost all walks of life. To put it simply, Saudi Arabia went back in time. And it tried to propagate these Wahhabi tenets globally. The kingdom pumped millions of dollars in exporting its hardline brand of Islam. This gave rise to political Islam across West Asia. It changed the region's history forever. Today, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia wants to undo this. He wants Saudi Arabia to return to moderate Islam. He wants his country to move away from the extremism that took root in 1979. And this is evident in the kind of statements that he makes. I'm going to quote from a 2017 interview with Guardian. And this is what MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, said in that interview in 2017. I'm quoting, "What happened in the last 30 years is not Saudi Arabia. What happened in the region in the last 30 years is not the Middle East. After the Iranian Revolution in 1979, people wanted to copy this model in different countries. One of them is Saudi Arabia. We did not know how to deal with it. and the problem spread all over the world. Now is the time to get rid of it. This desire to restore Saudi Arabia to its modern past, so-called modern past, what it was before 1979, is not limited to words, by the way. It reflects in Mohammed bin Salman's actions. He's pursuing reforms that arguably classify as the biggest cultural shake-up in the kingdom's history. Since coming to power, MBS has reopened cinemas, allowed women to drive, allowed them to enter stadiums, permitted them to undertake Hajj without a male guardian, and appointed his cousin as the first Saudi woman to head a sports federation. He also plans to revise the Saudi education system. At present, schools in Saudi Arabia operate on the tenets preached by the clergy. Strict gender segregation, for instance, that's very much in place. MBS wants to do away with such archaic practices. 2 months back, he promised to loosen these restrictions and revise school textbooks to tackle intolerance. He also plans to revise the Saudi education system. At present, schools in Saudi Arabia operate on the tenets preached by the clergy. Strict gender segregation, for instance. MBS plans to do away with such archaic practices. 2 months back, he promised to loosen these restrictions, to revise textbooks at schools to tackle intolerance. Critics say he's not showing the same tolerance for them. Some topics like democracy cannot be broached in Saudi Arabia. But there is a definitive churn in the society. The clergy finds itself with no option but to comply with this change, to live with it. I'll give you the most astonishing example. Saudi Arabia recently released the trailer of a video game. It features the former Imam of the Grand Mosque. His name is Adil Al-Kalbani. He recently appeared in the promo of Field Combat alongside Saudi artists and athletes. You have to watch this. That was the Imam of the Grand Mosque. You saw that, Saudi clerics appearing in video game teasers that contain both music and Western concepts. No prophecies could have ever predicted something like this. As I said, this is a churn. It could restore the kingdom to the pre-1979 era, not to mention lift Muslims around the world from the shackles of conservatism, because what happens in Saudi Arabia has a direct bearing on the rest of the Islamic world. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.